All right, hello. We are live. Welcome to the Agency Mastery Series. I'm Chris. We're just going to give a few moments for people to trickle in. While we're waiting, if you want to pop into the chat, where are you coming from this morning, bright and early? Well, maybe depending on where you are. Jason, what part of the country are you in?
I am in the Seattle area right now. I live in Portland, but I'm up in Seattle with my parents for a couple days, helping them out.
Let me guess, is it raining?
I can't. I'm sure it is. I went for a run this morning and it wasn't, but it must be by now. It's been an hour.
Nice, nice, cool. All right, so we got, Ryan is saying hello. We've got Shelly from Nova Scotia. Wow, that's awesome.
Nice.
Give a few more minutes for another minute for folks to just filter on in. And how long is your trip to Portland or Seattle? Sorry.
I am through the end of the week, and then I'm spending next week with my family in spring break. We're heading down to Mexico, which will be one of our first
Ooh,
family trips in since the start of the pandemic. So excited
yeah,
about that. It looks like we've got someone from Delhi as well,
yeah. Delhi,
South Carolina.
South Carolina. Cool. I'm all over. Yeah, I feel like all of our vacations have really just been like really local, hyper local
Yeah,
staycations.
yeah.
I'm very much looking forward to just a trip. We do have some folks in San Diego for social media marketing world, which is really cool. Kind of lament not being able to go there to check that out.
Yeah, I saw that just on the social handles. It looks like a good group down there.
Yeah, is anybody that's tuning in, is anyone following social media marketing world or actually, I mean, I'm imagining you wouldn't be attending here if you're at the conference, as cool as that would be. All right, well, let's jump in. Welcome everyone to the Agency Mastery Series. Once again, I'm Chris with the Cloud Campaign team, and today we are covering a massive topic. So we're going to jump into how to start, grow, and eventually sell your marketing agency. And we have someone who's very well versed in this area today. I'm very excited. Jason Burby. Jason, would you like to give just a quick intro of who you are, what you do, and sort of like what makes you qualified to have this conversation?
Yeah, you bet, Chris. And I think in terms of what makes me qualified, I'll simply share my experiences, and you guys can decide if I'm qualified on it. But I worked with a number of small agencies and then joined one in right around 2000, right after it was founded, and helped build it up. We were a digital agency. We called ourselves a web development shop at that point. We built it up and sold it in 2005 to WPP, which is one of the big ad holding networks. Right around that time, we wrote our first book called Actionable Web Analytics, which was really looking at how people use data to better understand web behaviors, everything else, interaction, all of those things, which was really helpful from a new business standpoint, which I'll talk about. When you sell an agency to WPP, you typically have what's called an earnout, so a 5-year earnout where they determine how much they're really going to compensate you for your agency. We went through that. That went quite well. At the end of that, we had an opportunity to roll our business in with a number of other businesses, which we decided to do and really took the lead on that new company that was created. It was a company called Possible. Over the next 3 or 4 years with that, we did 12 acquisitions that I was part of, led the integration on a handful of them. I've had the experience both on being acquired and being the company that acquires. When I left that company, I was the president of the Americas region. We had 8 offices, and I supported about 900 people, working with some amazing clients, primarily in North America, but some in LATAM as well. Took a few years and went to a company called Domo in Utah, one of the unicorn companies around big data and helping people use data. Had the opportunity to be on their executive team when we went public, which was a fascinating, amazing experience. Learned a ton. I got to go to NASDAQ on the day and do all of that, and then had the opportunity to come back to WPP a few years ago. And in doing so, came back in where they had taken our company and a few other companies and merged them together, creating a very large group called Wunderman Thompson. In that group, I was the chief client officer for North America. We had roughly 4,000 employees in North America, working with some amazing Fortune 500 companies, really doing everything from digital to broadcast to data, direct, whatever it may be. Truly a full service agency. And then in November, decided to step away from full-time work. And now I advise companies, primarily startups. I do board work, coaching and leadership type of work. Last year, I also joined the Cloud Campaign board. So I've had the opportunity to work with Ryan Ross and many of the other teams. I'm really passionate about what Cloud Campaign does and how it helps small agencies. So really the experience, everything from that early stage startup through sale, through other multiple acquisitions, through being a big agency, I think I bring a unique perspective of kind of that journey across those that I'm hoping will be valuable to share with folks on the webinar today.
Yeah, that's why I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, because there's just not so many people you can get on the hook that has that breadth of experience, especially from beginning to end, and being on both sides, both acquiring and being the agency that's acquired. So very excited to get into this stuff. If you do have questions, if you're tuning in, go ahead and pop those into the chat if you want. We're going to try and keep the conversation moving and fluid and organic. If there's some good ones, we'll definitely pause and take them. But we do want to try and capture those questions in the chat before we return to a Q&A at the end. So go ahead and post those questions when they come up, and we will get into those. All right, Jason, we have a lot of ground to cover. Ready to just dive right in?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So I think we're going to just take like the traditional storytelling approach with this: beginning, middle, end, because there's so much to cover. So starting from the beginning, establishing your agency. Let's pick a few topics to cover here, starting with where does one begin when you want to actually go off on this path and create your own agency?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think there's a number of ways to start, and one of the areas where I've seen it work well for people or people struggle is the importance of really picking a niche. What is it you're going to do really, really well? And I think as a small agency, as a young agency, as a starting agency, there's a natural tendency when someone asks, "Can you do it?" to say, "Yeah, we can do that," and maybe take on a really broad amount of work. Where I've seen a lot of agencies be successful is when they really carve out something they are great at and do that. And that doesn't mean they can't expand. That doesn't mean they can't shift, what they're working on. But the importance of having something you're great at will, I've found, lead to a lot of referrals, a lot of growth, a lot of opportunities. Because when you're in those early startup days, you want to make sure people know you're great at something. And again, over time, you can expand that. But one of the things I've seen with a lot of smaller agencies, especially as they're getting up and going, and especially if they have project-based work, is they're constantly looking for that next opportunity. And so that idea of being able to say no to things that don't fit you can be challenging to do. But over time, I've seen it pay off again and again, since so much of this does come through referral in the early days, especially.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of chuckle at that, because I remember, especially when I was starting out, and there's this, and we've talked about this before, like the hunt, you got to hustle, but you also have to do the work. And when you're trying to do everything for everybody just so you can, keep the lights on, that can be really hard. And there really has to be like a trade-off at some point. To make this a little more actionable, what would you advise somebody who wants to start their agency? Like how can they figure out what to specialize in? Sometimes it might not be as obvious when you're kind of trying to figure out, maybe just starting out, what you're actually good at.
Yeah. I think it comes back to passion. What are you passionate about? What do you find? I remember when I first got involved in the very early days of helping brands understand the internet. So we're talking 96, 97. It was more narrow. We were talking to companies like Weyerhaeuser and helping them understand why they should be online and what it would mean and how it can connect people, and really trying to convince them that they should spend spend any money there. So it was something in that case, I was really passionate about. The people I was working about were really passionate about the idea of bringing people forward in this new area. And so in my mind, it starts with passion. There's the idea of what are you good at? And then there's the idea of what do you love to do? And if you can find that bridge between where it's at, that's a great place to start. Now, the other great place to start is, what are the client opportunities in front of you out of the gate? And that's typically a combination of passion and what you're good at. But figuring out what our clients needing that you're talking to can be a great way to start. So if you're in the very, very early days, seeing where the tide is kind of taking you and what the interests are can allow you to establish that. And then as you get some momentum going, that's where I've seen a lot of companies have great success in really specializing and focusing on what they do versus saying, we do everything.
Yeah. So like an example of this, one of our customers, they handle mostly martial arts studios. And we can make up a story that, this person loves social media, but they also love martial arts
Yeah.
and marketing. And you don't have to, we don't have to draw the full picture, but you can see how one could turn their passion into a place where they can actually specialize and serve multiple martial arts studios in a verticalized way and serve them really well and become like an expert in that and focus on just that.
Yeah.
We have customers who've found a tremendous amount of success there. So I think it's like you said, just like figuring out where those passions lie and then identifying like where's the market need for that.
Yeah, that's a great example. And the idea of getting really good at that and then figuring out what are the things within the martial arts studio work you can take to another industry or another type of work, I think is a great way to then be deliberate about hopping over versus saying we do social media, which can mean so many different things to so many different people.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great example.
Okay, so we've talked about like some ways maybe you can kind of focus in and hone in on what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about social media. We're a social media management company, so that kind of falls
Yep.
under our wheelhouse. But it could be, if it's graphic design or if it's paid advertising, paid media, it could be anything. But you found your niche. It's time to start going to market. Where do you begin? Nobody knows who you are. What do you do?
Yeah, I think this is where I think networking is the best place to start. Right, getting those first few clients is really important. We were lucky enough when we started to have some contacts at Microsoft, and so we started talking to Microsoft about opportunities and some other local ones. And so starting with folks to really build up that momentum. And then when you do great work, more will come to you, and don't be afraid to ask for referrals. Hey, who else should I be talking to? Where else should I be looking? Who else should I be going to? And then when you do start specializing, like in the martial arts example, that then starts to make it easier to start reaching out and doing more cold calling or more kind of direct reach out in areas where you've got a specialty. But what I found is when you start, a lot of it is just the power of networking, the power of the people and then kind of pulling on some of those strings as you go through to see, well, who do they know? Who else can we help? What can we do? And again, that comes down to, in my mind, it comes back to that idea of really being focused and really being able to succinctly talk about what you do. Because if you're able to do that and you have that level of focus, when you go to someone and ask, hey, who else should I be talking to? If you've got something narrow and specific enough, it makes it easier for them to introduce you over. It may narrow the pool that they're going to do, but that's okay. Those are the people you want to be talking to anyway. But it makes it easier for them to introduce you to someone else they should connect with and talk to, and just follow those strings, follow those paths to see where they go, and be patient with that.
So I get this in theory. Networking is great. You get the benefits from it. I am an introvert. You might not have known this about me. I hate networking. I feel like I'm sleazy, like I'm trying to get something. And that's not the spirit of networking. It's more of like, how can I help other people and make connections? Can you give like your best tip on networking for people who hate to network?
Yeah, and let me be clear on that. I'm right on the border of introvert and extrovert. I don't like networking. I'm not going to walk in a room and shake hands with everybody and ask them if they want to work with me type of thing. That's not my style. When I say networking, I'm more literally talking to people talking to people you know and asking who they know, or if there's other people that they think that would be valuable for you to talk to. And not even in a salesy way, just, hey, I'm starting this thing up. We specialize in X. I'm trying to talk to a number of people that are in that area, or work with agencies like that, and to go to coffee or jump on a Zoom or whatever it may be. So my version of networking in that is really much more about who do I know, and then talk to them about ways they can introduce me. And when I say kind of follow that string and pull that forward, is that's really about going through that. And I can think of some examples where, I've got maybe 3 people deep on something, where my friend John introduces me to this person, Shelly over here introduces this person to Nick, and Nick is that, and that's actually a real example with real names. Nick and I ended up doing some really cool stuff together, but none of it was salesy. It was all, oh, you should talk to my friend so and so. They're pretty interesting, and I think you guys would have a lot in common. So that's the type of networking. It's really about the people you know, and then seeing if there's other people that they would recommend.
Yeah. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, even just like I go to the gym and 2 or 3 of the people that I talk to on a regular basis are all business owners, and they all
Yeah.
have challenges that they're facing. And just by having a casual conversation, you can kind of discover like, oh, I didn't know that person ran their own company.
Yeah.
That's really cool. And then there's, like, what are you struggling with? And even if you can't solve their problem, that's okay. And in some cases,
Yeah.
that might be a good thing if you know somebody that you could connect them to. Granted, that might not help your agency in the very short term, but you help somebody solve their problem and hopefully made a really good connection based on your network. That's money in the bank.
It absolutely is. And this is where it comes back to passion, right? If you're passionate about something, if you're excited about something, when you're at the gym and you're talking about something you do, people will pick that up, and people will see that, and people will want to connect and help you do other things. So again, it comes back to focus and passion, right? In a lot of ways on that.
Yeah. So as you're starting to build your name, make your name, build your brand and get that
Mhm.
awareness, where does thought leadership play into that? And sort of like, where should you pay attention to that, and maybe how?
Yeah. I'll talk about the way in which we did it, and then talk about it more generally. I mentioned we wrote a book in 2005. I was a co-author of. Did the same in 2015. 2015 was published by McGraw-Hill, called Does It Work? And we did that. And that was as we were moving our company that we had sold, merging in with a few others that we then ended up leading. And with that book, it was really about defining, not only for our people. We had about 1,500 people in the global agency at that point. Um, but of the 1,500 people, getting them all on board with the philosophy, how we thought, but we also used it as a way for thought leadership around speaking, a way when we were pitching a client. It's easy to go in and pitch a client and tell them your solution to their problem. It's a lot stronger when you can walk in with a book or a white paper or something else, and say, hey, this was published last year. Don't believe just what I'm saying now. Take a look, just flip through it and see what it is. It also helped us attract talent. It helped us open up new doors. It helped us do a lot of things. So we went the book route, but that's just one route. We were also very intentional about it. We did want it to be published by a legitimate publisher. The number of copies we sold was less important, although it sold north of 10,000 copies, which was great. It exceeded our expectations and hit what the publisher wanted to hit. But we really used it as a way to signal what we stood for and what was important to us and how we were different than other agencies at the time. So a lot of times when I think about thought leadership, there can be so much noise out there. The idea of making it really clear what you stand for and how you're differentiated from other groups can be really powerful. And so when you think about how you leverage thought leadership, whether it's speaking, whether it's doing webinars, whether it's white papers, whether it's any of these other things, it can be really valuable to be clear on differentiation, be clear on what you stand for. And again, hopefully it's tied to a passion and it's narrow enough that people understand what you do versus trying to be all things to everyone. And so it's interesting because we did that when we were a small agency, and a smaller agency. We had about 150, 200 people. With the first book we wrote, that was the publisher on that was Cybex. And then we did it again when we were a much larger group. Yet the intent of the book and what we got out of both of the books 10 years apart were very similar. And what we wanted, what we set out to do when we did it, of being clear what we stand for, differentiating, using it as a lead generation tool, as a leave behind at events, and to show clients what we really stood for as we were in the process of pitching them, was really consistent across both books, just at different scales, obviously.
Yeah, and writing a book is a tremendous undertaking, and so congratulations on hitting those markers and having the ability to do that. For folks who are maybe newer in their career, newer in their business, or might not have either the ability to write a book, whatever it is, what are some other ways they can consolidate some of their knowledge into a package that could be Should they focus on doing this all at once and have I've got my book and now I can go to market finally, or is it something I can do over time? What would you advise?
For sure, they shouldn't wait and get it all bundled up in a book. Writing a book is a tremendous amount of work, and I don't think I probably won't do it again, and I don't know if I'd advise them to do it. It's a tremendous amount of work. Luckily, we had a lot of help on it with both books that we did. But I was just using the book as an example. I think a blog, I think white papers, I think writing things on LinkedIn, whatever it may be, wherever you think your audience may be, doing those things can be valuable. It can be short form videos. It can be, again, we're talking a lot about social media management. It can be a lot done within social in short snippets, whether that's a Instagram or YouTube or TikTok or Snap or whatever it may be. It is, in my mind, less about the format and more about having a point of view, differentiating, and consistency, right? The book gives you automatic consistency because there's a lot of content there. But if you're going to do it in short form or other things, having that repetitive and different views on it in a differentiated way can do some of the exact same things. And then showing a history of that over time can be really valuable as well. So by no means do I believe writing a book with a publisher or self-publishing is the only answer, or maybe even a right answer right now. It's just that idea of thought leadership and getting your point of view out there can be valuable. And that can start small. That can start with 1 or 2 articles, right? And maybe making a commitment of, I'm going to do 1 or 2 articles. I'm going to post it on my agency blog. I'm going to post it on LinkedIn. I'm going to post it elsewhere. I'm going to do a newsletter type of thing. That's a great place to start. And again, what you're trying to do there is get a point of view out, differentiate, and get people curious to hear more about what you do. And the beautiful thing with all of that, and then I'll pause on the question, but beautiful thing with all of that we would love is then when we're talking to a new client, when we're talking to someone new, being able to point back to an article, or in our case, a chapter in the book that goes deeper into that topic, can be really helpful in a sales process. Or again, when you're networking and someone's maybe not ready to buy from you, say, hey, this came up in our conversation and I just wanted to share this with you because I think it would be beneficial or helpful to you, can be a really powerful tool. It can be a great excuse to deliver value to someone and do that. And I remember I wrote for a digital pub years ago before we did the books, actually. It's how the publisher found us. And I remember talking to a client, and it was kind of a mid-tier client, a mid-tier role, and they were trying to get their boss to see something. And they called me up one day and they're like, hey, I know you publish every 2 weeks. Would you be willing to write about this topic? Because I'm trying to get my VP to see and understand what this means. And he's going to believe you a lot more than he's going to believe me. And I said, well, what's the topic? And it was something that was interesting to me. And I did write about it. I don't know if I took his angle that he wanted, but I did write about it. And sure enough, like 3 weeks later, the guy calls me back. He's like, I sent him the article. We're fully going to do that. It was about prioritizing initiatives based on ROI. Which is a pretty straightforward thing, but people weren't thinking about it back then. But again, that power of having something out there like that you can point back to in the past can be really helpful. It doesn't need to be, these don't need to be super long form.
Right. Well, and like you said, I mean, there has to be something to be said for consistency. Like if you can
Yeah.
pick a cadence and stick with it, that is going to serve you more than anything else that I can imagine, like just staying
Yes.
consistent with your message. But also like as you build that content out, like you said, you can slice it up, you can reuse it, repurpose it. The 2 webinars ago with Marie Cole, I just got an email, a sales email from somebody who watched it and used my content against me to try and pitch me something, which
That's
was like,
amazing.
well played.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But it's interesting when you can you have a base of content and then you know who your audience is and be able to make those very insightful, very direct cold outreaches that have a higher probability to gain some traction. I emailed that guy back, like he did a little bit of homework and made a clever sales outreach with something I need.
Sure.
Okay, we're going to have this conversation. That's fine. Now, if I'm in a space, I want to kind of eventually get into the middle and end part of the agency, but there's one part that I'm really curious about. So if I'm trying to establish my agency, I might be newer. My marketing experience is still foundational and growing. And I haven't really identified like where I'm differentiated or have like a clear, maybe viewpoint on something. Do you have any advice for somebody who can kind of like start working toward that within their specialty?
Yeah.
Like what would be, I know it's kind of an ambiguous question, but.
It is. And I think ironically, it comes back to passion and having a strong point of view, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is what is it? It can be something very black and white, like the example you gave of martial arts studios. It can also be, I like to work with, restaurants or businesses that have a strong health related view. And what I bring forward, what I'm great at is bringing forward the passion and understanding of why health is important to people and getting more people in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I do that by doing X, Y, and Z. So some of it is just the story that you create and really owning that story. So I would argue it's less important what the differentiator is. It's more important to define it and really be consistent with it to build that up over time. And that doesn't mean you can't change it. That doesn't mean you can't adjust it. And this is something that we were careful with early on. We had 2 different go-to-markets when we were acquired. And it doesn't matter that we were acquired for this, but it'll make sense why. We were brought in by other agencies for being data experts. And so we had our go-to-market and our differentiated story when we were talking to our sister agencies. And that was about helping people leverage data, testing, optimization, search at that point, that sort of thing. Our broader go-to-market when we were talking to Microsoft or large financial institutions or Converse was much more of a holistic digital agency. We were able to own those 2 really well, and it was a little tricky on the website, but when we were talking to people, we were able to own it really well by having those kind of almost 2 front doors, depending on who we were talking to. We did that because our sister agencies were not going to bring us in for full service digital because some of them felt like they could do it, but they would always bring us in on data and optimization and search because they knew they could not do that. So in some ways you can have, I believe that is still focused. It's very intentional. It's differentiated by having a couple of different options. Now you can do different websites on that. You can do different landing pages on that, promotions, a number of different ways you can deal with that. That was all based on target audience and kind of where we're at the time.
Okay. So like my big takeaway from that is maybe the question, what do you want to be known for in your space? And once you kind of have that idea solidified, then the steps that you need to take to get there become a lot more actionable and clearer if you want to carve out that space for yourself.
And how do you make sure you don't sound like everyone else in the space that's doing it? So what are you going to do differently, right? I think, especially when you're a small agency, there's a lot of different opportunities. There's a lot of different people pitching maybe for the same type of work. What are you going to do to not look the same as the rest of them? What is going to be your secret sauce that you can really lean into and try to own, maybe not owning globally, but owning with the competitive set that you typically compete with?
Yeah, that's I think great advice. And a great segue as well into kind of like this middle part of the agency life cycle where we're moving from the hunt, the proud, establishing your
Mm-hmm.
business, trying to attract clients. I remember when I was starting out, there was a very clear point where, I was hunting, and then I'm like, oh, if I get long-term recurring clients, this part is a lot easier for me.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit? Because I think that for me was like really critical because it gave me more room to do better work. I had
Yep.
more stability in my life. And then like I could focus on things like networking and some of those other business development pieces. Can you talk a little bit about that shift and maybe some strategies how you can kind of
Yeah.
turn toward that modality?
Yeah, you bet. A lot of times, as agencies are just getting up and going, it can be almost exclusively project work, right? They may not have that basis for ongoing work, and they're grabbing at that initial project. Now, some of those you can convert over into long term, but if you're only in that project level work, you're constantly having to go out and hunt. And if you can't extend those existing clients, it makes it much more difficult. It makes it much more difficult to grow. Onboarding clients is typically quite expensive, as we all know, versus doing great work, and there's risk in it, versus doing kind of ongoing work with the same client sets. And so that idea of figuring out, being okay with taking some level of project work, but also figuring out how do you convert that into ongoing? How do you make yourself invaluable to the companies you're working with that they do need you for more and more? Maybe they just hired you to do this, but what are the other ways in which you can help them be successful long term? Social is such a great way because social is never done, right? Whether it's a platform or journey or whatever it may be, it's never done. So how do you do things that make yourself more valuable to them over time? And what I see a lot of agencies doing is having that project work to begin with. How do you convert some of that over? You're not going to convert all of it. You're always going to have some project level work for most agencies. But how do you start shifting that? And then how do you target the right opportunities and have that ideal customer profile of the companies you're going after that will allow you to convert a good chunk of them to ongoing? That becomes really important. So the project work ends up being a lot harder and more expensive and more time consuming than the ongoing work. And a flip side of that, one other thing I'll mention is we found that smaller clients ended up being almost the same amount of work as the larger clients. And so when you look at that and you say, but typically the smaller clients aren't necessarily able to pay the same amount as the larger clients. And so I think a lot of this comes down to having an ideal customer profile, and people will talk about it as ICP. You can do a quick Google on that and see what those are, where you really get in and you're deliberate about the types of companies you want to work with, and then figuring out where is your sweet spot within that. And are you better to get 10 little guys that are project based, or are you better to get 4 slightly larger that you can convert half of over into ongoing? And just make sure you're deliberate about how you're targeting that. Maybe you let a couple of smaller ones through because they're helping you pay the bills and get going. But man, moving to where you've got more of them recurring, and you can pick the percentage where you're at today versus where you want to be, but
Mhm.
making that shift will make things a lot easier, and allow you to do better work and allow you to grow and bring on more great people and allow you to over time potentially extend your offerings and what you're doing, which all of that adds stability. And as you're starting an agency, as you're getting going, stability is really important, right? Having that stability in clients and revenue and so forth is super important.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a very risk averse person, so like the
Hmm.
freelancing, consulting, independent route it was fun and I learned a lot. But yeah, it was definitely there's this looming, you know, edge over your over your head as you're trying to, continue your business and grow.
Yeah,
Um, I think you have to do the project based stuff at first to get one. You just got to cut your teeth on stuff,
no doubt. Yep.
but it helps you, for me at least, it helped me identify the opportunities where I could make that shift. Like you
No
don't know
doubt.
what you don't know necessarily, and
Yeah.
you have to really work with your clients, start solving their problems, and really start seeing what problems they have that they don't even know they're having in some cases.
Totally agree.
And then then you can identify clearly, like, oh, I could help you with that.
Yeah.
And then with the caveat that you should be able to actually, within your skill set, help them with that. Sometimes it's easy to fall into the trap where you identify opportunities and want to help, but maybe you don't have the resource necessarily to do it. Refer that to your networking friend.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that is, that project work out of the gate is a great way to, again, you're gonna be able to figure out how to differentiate what you're passionate about, what your specialty can be, all of those things. So I'm by no means saying that you can or you should or even can skip that step. It's just the idea of how do you start to move from that and start to get more recurring. Seen multiple agencies, especially in the early days, start and they bring in a bunch of work, and then they've got to deliver on all the work, and they deliver on all the work, and they start to push it out the door, and they've got nothing coming up, and so they've now got to run to the other side of the boat and start doing more of the hunting and getting the next thing on, and then they've got to deliver on all of that, and it creates these giant waves of energy, revenue, stress, concern, right? So that idea of how do you make sure even when you're really busy, and even when even if it's a small team is feeling bogged down, how do you make sure you're constantly looking at what is next and what else can we be doing, so you don't have those big peaks and valleys.
Yeah. And the other piece too is, you find a big project that pays well. And if that project goes away or that recurring client goes away, if they're such a big part of your revenue, that can also be just like another risk that we need to pay attention to, making sure that not all our eggs are in one basket.
Yeah, that's a really big one when you're starting out, especially if you get some momentum. I remember we've over the years, looked at 150 different companies to buy. And we would find some that had great, great growth. And I'm thinking of one in particular. I won't mention the name. It's a few years old, but they had something like 80%. They were growing like crazy. Their numbers looked great, but 80% of their revenue came from Google. Google was their primary client, and it had been that way for years and years and years. And they were riding that wave, which was phenomenal. It was great, and they continued to ride it even after we decided not to purchase them. But the idea that they couldn't differentiate, and they couldn't diversify. They'd been trying for a few years, but at the pace that Google was growing, even when they had other clients growing, it wasn't moving in that direction. That can be a really scary position. Luckily, it was a company like Google who was growing aggressively and could do different things. But that idea of having not all your eggs in one basket, not having any single client over 30 or 50%, can be important. Now, when you're first starting out, you have 2 or 3 clients, you're surely going to have someone over 30%, maybe over 50. But as you move through kind of the life cycle, as you grow, that can be important. And it's not that you don't want to take advantage of the growth that you're having with that client and keep doing that. It's just super important to make sure you've got other people working on other things and looking at ways to diversify that client base.
Yeah, because there's nothing worse than just hearing like, oh, our biggest account is just gone.
Yeah.
Okay, what do we
Yeah.
do? That's
Yeah.
a hard pill to swallow.
It is.
Let's continue on our journey through the life cycle. Moving on to pitching yourself. So as you get into this new phase of long-term relationship building, recurring work, the request for proposal process, the RFP process, and the pitching process becomes, I think, that much more pivotal in your success. Do you want to jump in on that a little bit? Lend your insights there?
Yeah. Yeah, you bet. Really, no matter what phase of the life cycle we were in, very small versus very large, our work came from 2 primary areas. Some of it was brought from our parent company, but came from 2 primary areas. The one was simply referrals and relationships. It was people we had worked with in the past or had talked to someone we worked with in the past, and it came in that way. The other were RFPs, and there's 2 distinct versions of RFPs that we would see. One is we knew someone there, we had worked with them, someone on our team had worked with them, and again, this is from very small to very large agency sizes. There was that sort of RFP, and you could get in and do well and have a decent win rate on those. The other RFP is the completely blind ones. You go on LinkedIn, you look at the company, no one has any connections to them. They got your name somehow. we would take those, again, small agency or large agencies, we would take those and really quickly try to make a decision. Why are we included in this? Understand, why are we included in this? Is there a referral that we're not seeing, we're not aware of? Is there another reason? Or are we one of 15 people, one of 15 agencies that just got added to it, maybe because of our name or something else? Those can be super scary. Now, a lot of times those are really exciting because they feel like true, like greenfield. They're brand new. Man, wouldn't that be great? We'd love to work with that brand. Got to be really careful with those, because if there's 15 people that it went out to, 15 different agencies or 15 different groups, surely 2 or 3 of those have worked with them before or worked with someone on their team before. And so with those RFPs, we would try to get in. We'd spend a lot of time right up front figuring out, do we have a chance to win this? Do we have a right to win this? Does it align to what we're known for and what we're amazing at? Can we figure out why we're included? Is there some sort of relationship or referral or something we're not aware of? If those things didn't match, we made the decision to walk away from some RFPs that were really attractive and really sexy and would have been amazing brands to work with, just because we didn't feel we really had a decent chance of winning it. And when you're pitching, you can spend a lot of time and dollars and energy on going after those. So I think as you're growing and moving through that life cycle, really being deliberate on what are you going to pitch, what are you not going to pitch, so you're not wasting time, is really important. Now, that does not mean that you shouldn't swing for the fences every now and then, but be smart when you're swinging for the fences on that. That can be really hard when it's an amazing brand that you've always wanted to work with, or maybe you're a customer or you're a fan of something, or it's something you've been wanting to get into. And again, there's not a black or white answer on this. It's simply the idea of being deliberate about it and being conscious about it and making appropriate decisions on it, and really understanding, why are you part of that RFP?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to be said about just intentionality in your
Mm-hmm.
work that you take on, and you really are threading that balance. Which it's such the economist's answer. Like, don't take work that you shouldn't, but also sometimes you
Yeah.
have to. I think it
Yeah.
really comes down to what you said earlier of like defining your secret sauce, really honing in on what's your line in the sand and what are you capable of, sticking to that, um, and pushing yourself like when it's appropriate. And sometimes the scary reality is sometimes you're going to make a mistake,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes you're going to reap some amazing successes. And I think that's part of the thrill of building a business, building an agency, and doing this type of work. Before we kind of move into the last and most exciting part of selling your agency, can you quickly cover just how does culture and the environment and the workplace and your values, going back to intentionality, how does that sort of encapsulate what you
Yeah.
do and like how you sort of navigate and manage your business?
Yeah, I think it's core. For many agencies, unlike Cloud Campaign that has a product and something that is being sold, for a lot of agencies, what you're really selling is your people. It's not widgets, it's your people, it's your experience. And as we've looked at over the last few years, as the talent war has gotten just hotter and hotter and hotter, keeping people engaged, motivated, growing, exciting is really important. Culture and teamwork and fun and all those things throughout the agency, from very small to very large, was always something that I over-indexed on, and that was important to me. And luckily, the people I was working around and with, that was super important to them as well. But people work at agencies typically because they like diversity of projects, diversity of work. It's fun, it's more casual. There's good times to be had in those. I think that whole idea of bringing all of those together is only more important as we go through, again, more of a talent battle. And that can mean moving away from unhealthy clients when needed, choosing
Mhm.
not to chase something in an industry that people don't support or believe in, firing a client who doesn't treat people well, getting people out of the business that aren't living the values. So
Mhm.
that idea of being really clear, and it starts with leadership, it can start with the founders, it can start with the people who are kind of the front of the organization. what are the values that they're going to live by as an agency, as an organization, and then making sure that that really happens. So when people go against those values, because we all can screw up and maybe get frustrated and act in a way that doesn't align with intentions, is making it comfortable and easy to call people out on that, and to course correct on that. And that is something that I saw over the years of maybe someone's having a rough week or that they're in a bad situation, and someone kind of pulling them aside and saying, hey, I know this isn't how we want to be doing this, or this isn't what we stand for. I'm here to help. I just want to figure out, how we can switch that around. And man, if you can get that going within your agency and the culture and that sort of thing, it's super important. I think team building is another one that is, with the distributed workforce now and people spread all over the place. One of the big things I'm seeing smaller agencies and companies do now is they're double down and investing on getting people together in person. So maybe you don't have to travel as much to client sites, but where they're spending the money and where they are traveling is the idea of getting people together, to bond and connect and have fun. And that can carry a lot of things when things do get hard, or to build trust with people working across distributed teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't need to dive too far into just how the pandemic has completely shifted and reshaped
Yeah.
how we communicate, collaborate across teams. But I know with our company, we're spread across 2 states, and having that connection, having opportunities to even join each other remotely just makes that world of difference. As we shift, because we're coming closer to the end of our time, and I don't want to gloss over this last piece. You've gone through all these steps. You've grown your agency. What is that last piece when you're ready to sell? Is it just like, oh, I did a great job, and someone's going to come knocking on my door and ask to buy my agency? How does this process work?
Yeah. It's all over the board. It's typically an intentional decision that is made. And with what we did and what I saw with a lot of other agencies we acquired, is people hire a banker to put a process together and to go see who could be interested parties in buying it. Could be a big ad holding company like WPP or Omnicom or some of the others, but it could also be consulting firms. It could be PE firms. It could be across the board. But typically is finding and hiring a banker to help run the process. And running the process, basically, they'll help you put together the story, what needs to go out. They'll contact the appropriate parties that could be interested and help you move through that. That process always takes way longer than you think. Typically, from the deals that we did, including our deal, was 12 to 18 months from the time you start that process to the time something closes. The downside in that is if you take your eye off the ball of clients and growth and you're focusing on selling, there were a number of companies we were talking to that submarine themselves during the process because they weren't focusing on their clients. And so one of the first things I would say as I started to talk to people or got involved in the process was clients, be careful with your team and your staff of getting them, thinking about all this. It will take longer than you think. And then there's different reasons people do that. One is to have more scale and access to more clients. Others are for founders to take money off the table. Others maybe because they're done and want to shift to something else. Having said that, many of these deals are in the earn-out type of structure for a true kind of purist agency where there's not technology that someone's buying. Their typical earn-out is 5 years. Some are 3 years. Some can be negotiated to different, but a lot of times for agencies, again, since what you're buying is the people and the relationships and the offering, it's generally not a good thing of, hey, I want to stop working next year. I'm gonna go do this and jump in on it.
I think that piece is a really good takeaway. Just knowing that, one, it's a process, not unlike trying to buy a house in this market right now.
Yeah.
And it's going to take a lot more time than you need. And you really can't let your foot off the gas, because if you do, it could just completely derail. They want to see that this is going to be a sustainable, profitable company over time. And if you can't keep that up, you're asking for trouble.
Yeah.
What if you were selling your agency, what type of things, or maybe if you're buying an agency, what are you looking for? Like what kind of like package are you putting together? What are you
Yeah.
trying? What's valuable? When people are looking through sheets of businesses for sale.
Yeah, for us, what we were always looking for was how will this allow us to grow or tell a different story than we've told in the past? If we were already pretty good at something, it didn't make sense to go out and buy more of what we were already great at, because we could just build that over time and hire more people and do that. But if there was something that was, an offshoot of that that was differentiated that we could plug into a lot of our existing clients, that was really exciting. So we did an acquisition probably 6 years ago of a great mobile shop, iOS, Android, went into TV and Roku and all sorts of other things. But we bought them because we had been doing some app work, but we just had a couple people that did it. They had 30 or 40 people when we acquired them, and we're doing major, major, major work. We wanted to bring them in as a way to show the market, show our clients, show our prospects that we not only had an answer to mobile, but that we had an amazing solution around mobile that we could bring forward. So I would always look for what is something that can differentiate us, what is a group that is growing top line and has a reasonable profit margin. And I would describe a reasonable profit margin when we were looking to acquire. And again, I'm talking agency specific, so it's people of between 15 and 20% margin. So what is someone in there? If they were a little lower, let's understand why, and can we get them there? But the big thing was, how can this differentiate us, and how can this help evolve a story that is complementary to what we do, that we can bring to existing and new clients?
Does the source of revenue, how much does that play in like stability of revenue? Does that factor, or how much does that weigh in terms of your evaluation process?
The source of revenue matters. Again, if it's 80% one client, that definitely would be an issue, just because it creates unnecessary risk. We would look at, if someone was working in an industry that we didn't particularly want to work in, like if all of their, I'll pick on an easy one, if all of their revenue was coming from, say, tobacco, and that didn't align with what we stood for, we probably would not. That is not something we would make an investment in. Others would, and there's no judgment on that. That wouldn't be something that we would necessarily be interested in. So source of revenue, potentially, if there was something that made us uncomfortable, but that was very rare. It would typically come down to distribution of revenue, and then some clients or some companies we bought had a higher percentage of project work versus retained work. If they were growing and there was reason for that, and reason for a high percentage of project work, we'd be okay with that. If they were more stagnant, we're probably not talking to them anyway, and that could be because of project work. But I saw Jerry had a great question in the chat: is what's the length of time most agencies retain clients? And Jerry, that's all over the board from what I've seen. If it's project work, maybe it's 6-8 months. If it's longer retained work, 3, 4, 5 years. The one thing I will say that would a lot of time lead to us losing clients is the average life cycle of a CMO at an organization. They've in the past compared to the gestation period of a elephant, which I believe is 22 months, but don't check me on that. CMOs are moving in and out of organizations quite quickly. I believe now, that's a few years old, I believe now it's up to about 3 years. But when you think of a CMO leaving an organization, or head of marketing leaving an organization, whenever that would happen to us, we would, as quickly as we can, get in close to who is that replacement, because that replacement has other agencies they've worked with and for, and ties and everything else. And so a lot of times when you see churn in agencies, it is very often because of turnover on the client side, and they want to bring in their own team, and they want to do things like that. There are outliers in that. An example of the client I was just, or the agency I was just with, Wonderman Thompson. We've worked with the Marines, the United States Marine Corps, for over 70 years. We have been their agency of record, helping with recruiting and other things. Rolex has been a client for north of 50 years, and so you will have some of those longer outliers. But I think that the typical one is often 4 to 5 years, and a lot of times that's based on turnover on the client side, or maybe things have gotten stagnant, or whatever it may be.
I think that's just a great tip of really keeping your eye focused on the relationship piece of the businesses and agencies that you're working with, because I think it's very easy to lose track of those little things, like, oh, the causation is because somebody left, and
yeah,
being able to like know that and mitigate that ahead of time can hopefully potentially save your portfolio or mitigate some risk there.
With that, here's a green flag and a red flag to watch for. I'll start with the red flag, actually. If you are working with a brand or client and you are the agency, if there is turnover of that marketing lead, that's a giant red flag, and you need to double down and get everyone on that ASAP to form a relationship with that new leader, because there may be changes coming. If you can effectively get in front of that and get support and show the great work, and maybe you've got support elsewhere in the organization you can bring forward, you can, in most cases, overcome that. But it's for sure a red flag, all hands on board. I missed too many of those in my career, or we went in too little too late on too many of those in my career. A green flag is a company you're looking at, or something you've wanted to work towards, or someone that you're wanting to talk to. They have new leadership that goes in there, new CMO, new head of marketing, whatever it may be. Great time to hit them up. Now, others are hitting them up as well, but the chance of them over the next 6 to 12 months changing agencies, or at least looking at agencies, goes through the roof. Yeah. So from a prospecting standpoint, that's a great trigger to look for, to go in and replace someone.
And just to add more credence to that, I can just say firsthand have experienced both sides of those situations that you've just mentioned. The red flag, where things just get, everyone gets canned and they bring in their own new agencies that they like. And anytime I've started a new in-house marketing position, I get pitched all of the pitches.
Exactly. Yeah. And so when that's happening, how do you find ways to differentiate yourself so you don't sound like one of the 10 people calling or reaching out that can help them do everything, whatever everything is? But how do you do that in a differentiated way?
And there is opportunity there. Props to Anjay from what I'm trying to find what he works for. Who he made a good outreach with that sales email I mentioned earlier. And so we're going to have a conversation. So it does work. You can do it.
I like it.
You just have to be thoughtful about it. Jason, I think we were pushing into an hour, so I do want to wrap up. I do want to offer a chance for Q&A. Does anybody have any questions? Pop them in the chat. We answered Jerry's. Thanks for segueing into that.
You bet.
If you have any questions, please pop them into the chat. We'll give you a few moments to do that, and before we wrap. Otherwise, do you have any other last parting words, Jason? Any of the nuggets of wisdom to leave our audience before we adjourn?
No, I think that the only other thing I'd say is, working in an agency, working in this work, is that creativity can and should be fun, and that idea of enjoying yourself as you're going through it, and trying to minimize some of the stress things, like the waves of needing work, delivering work, needing work, delivering work. But coming back to the importance of culture, and coming back to the importance of, for many agencies, it is all about the people, is the importance to treat them well, the importance to create an environment that people love and want to work with. All of those things will have a big impact on success, and getting people to see that overall vision with clarity, excitement, enthusiasm. That's what's going to keep this going, and that's what's going to drive creativity. And then the last thing I would say is the importance of diversity, and diversity in agencies. There's too few lead female creative directors, yet something like 80% of all purchasing decisions in North America are made by women. yet much of the advertising is still created by white males. And so the idea of greater diversity is the right thing to do. It's also the smart thing to do in business and this sense. And I think the more and more we look at the diversity of our nation, and wherever your clients are, their businesses is at, diversity is going to bring a lot to the table and will make you more successful. So fight the urge of hiring people that look and think and feel and seem like you, because that will limit your growth and success.
Thanks for ending on that. We could probably do a whole conversation on just that piece, but I think especially as people who are a part of that majority, it really is on us to create opportunities and elevate and open those perspectives and doors for everybody. So thank you for including that, because I think that is incredibly important as we grow. Jason, where can folks find you online? You've got a couple of books. Do you want to plug some pluggables?
Yeah, I'm great. I'm really at this point, I'm really looking to help serve others, start up. If people want to connect with me, you connect with me through LinkedIn, or jason@burbyventures.com is my email. Happy to answer any other questions that come through. I've really enjoyed over the last year working with the Cloud Campaign team, and really impressed with what they've created and are bringing to market under Ryan and Ross's leadership, and the power and the tools that they put to drive efficiency. I wish we had these tools much earlier in my career, in the way in which they do it. So huge fan. But yeah, anyone, feel free to reach out, Jason@Burby Ventures or LinkedIn. And if any follow-up questions come up, I'm happy to address them.
Sorry, I just hit the drop my lever seat down as you finished.
No worries.
Also, you have two books, Actionable Web Analytics and also Does It Work?
Yeah.
Two really great books that you can find on Amazon if you want to level up your marketing game. Jason, thank you so much for this conversation. It was an absolute pleasure to dive into all of this stuff. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And good luck, everyone, going forward.
Yes, thank you. So that's it for today's Agency Mastery series. If you're interested in learning more about Cloud Campaign and how it can help scale your agency, head over to cloudcampaign.io and jump on a free trial. Check it out. Otherwise, thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you next month for another live discussion. Bye.
Thank you.